This channel is for educational purposes only. Make sure you do your own due diligence before making any investments. And there is inherent risk in trading, so it's speculative. Just make sure you keep that in mind.
Hi, this is Joe Rabil. I'm going to talk about a specific stock setup. I'm using two time frames today, weekly and daily. I want to show how a stock can look like a buy setup. It meet all the criteria, but if we start to delve down and look at a little bit more detail, it could easily be eliminated as a potential candidate. And this goes to, again, looking at the bars, doing some analysis on that, and incorporating the MACD and the ADX as well on both time frames to help you zero in on really what the best candidates are. The example I'm going to use today is CREE. CREE, and I've got the weekly chart on the left and the daily chart on the right. And what I've done is I've moved the chart over so the hard right edge is where we're looking right now on each time frame. So it's as if this is today or this week, and this would be today here for the daily chart. And what I want to do is start on the weekly, and I want to show you what's been taking place. So if you notice, we have this nice move to the upside with good confirming of 40 reading on the ADX line, strong green DI showing the buyers are good. And then we got a pullback here. Green stayed above red throughout that pullback. And, this had one really big down bar that caused it to spend several weeks working sideways before it was really ready to get going again. And, again, we always want to look at the size of these bars and look how they're reacting based on that. The good news was we had this big bar to the downside. We had an inside bar and then really didn't get a significant amount of follow through from that. And the 18 remained rising above the 40. So, at that point, this still had pretty good pattern in place. We'd go down to the lower time frame to look for an entry. Then we got another strong move to the upside with confirming ADX, where the ADX got up to about 48. And it pulled back, but didn't pull back all the way to the 18, and then tried to make another push. And if you notice, so we had a strong reading. I consider this to be a strong reading to the upside and now a pullback to the 18-week moving average. But if we look at a few things that took place in the price bars, number one, we had a spike up here with a tail that formed, and then a pretty hard down move. And then we recovered pretty well, but then we only made a minor new high and then reversed. And then again, it tried to recover and get itself back above 125, but it couldn't do it. And then we had two really hard down bars. Now they created some spike lows where you can see that they closed more like in the middle of the bar rather than at the low end of the bar. But they were still pretty hard down moves. And if we start to look at this move from all the way from here, all the way down to there. I mean, that's a pretty big drop in a short period of time in just 2 weeks. So, I think we want to keep that in mind when we're looking at this and saying, okay, that's a pretty big drop. Even if this were to recover here and this 18 stays above the 40 and keeps rising, I probably wouldn't be jumping all over this on the first pullback. So I might not even go down to the lower time frame yet because I don't like the way this has come down. It's come down too hard, too fast. And, even though it's showing pretty decent support at 100, if you notice, every time it gets down below the 100 interweek, it hasn't closed back below it. And we've gotten a rally. So I still would keep this on my watch list. It just wouldn't be on the short-term list, maybe the ones that I'm looking for this week, just based on the overall action. So that means if I go down to this time frame, this did have the opposing trend pattern where the 18 was below the 40, and the price was below the 18, below both moving averages. So we had a setup, and then we got the price to close back above both. It did make a pretty big move to get there, so I wouldn't really be inclined to buy as it crosses the 40 here. Probably be looking for a higher low to form. And one of the things I wanted to point out here, because the MACD on the weekly came down through its signal line, I think we have to be a little bit more patient in this type of pattern, because a lot of times what takes place in that situation is, even if you have strong ADX, and strong ADX is really the most important factor for me in terms of determining whether I want to play this. The MACD helps with the timing, and the fact that this is rolled over tells me that we're probably going to come up, run into some resistance, maybe back down and form more of a sideways pattern before this really gets going again to the upside. So I would plan on, if MACD crosses over in this situation with strong ADX, I would be more inclined to believe that you get some kind of a double bottom or a sideways consolidation pattern before this emerges again. So I think it's pretty important to keep that in mind in this situation, because again, you're going to have a lot of stocks that play into this type of pattern, and I think you want to know how to handle it. So it's still a candidate, but probably not one that I'm looking to play on the first rally, which would be this one. Now, I do want to see what takes place here. So I would probably draw in a downtrend line here and see how it handles this. So we're breaking the downtrend line, but do we get a pullback that's mild, or does it come down really deep and test the lows again? Because if it does, then we probably need to rethink what's going on. Part of the problem is, the MACD definitely came down well below the zero line, and ADX, the red, based on the red DI went up, held the 25 line, and then made a new high here. So really the sellers are in command right now. If you look at the way this is playing out, this decline to the downside was actually strong enough to get the sellers to take over the strength right now. They're kind of in control. So what do we need to take place? We're going to need to see green DI start to come up here and show a little bit more improvement. I also notice when MACD overcomes the zero line to the downside that it usually will jostle around here and maybe bump its head on the zero line once before it's really ready to go again. So if we start to go through this bar by bar and I look at the next bar, so right after you get what would consider to be an official trigger by closing back above the 40, you go hard down. And based on the evidence that I've told you, it shouldn't be a surprise it's the way this played out. Now, you could have bought this here and put your stop in underneath this low and then just kind of wait it out, because there's a pretty good chance we're going to go sideways for, a while, but maybe not take out this bottom. And you could do that. You could play this, you could buy this here, which I really don't think is very timely because it's up so many days in a row. But you could play that, use this as a stop, and then see how this plays out. You probably have to wait it out, but you could do it that way. What I would prefer to do when I see this is maybe wait and see if we get a second trigger. Let this play down, come down here, and then see how the ADX and the MACD play out. So if we keep moving forward, the stock, starts to move sideways. It's not taking out this low, which is what I just pointed out. You could have a stop down here and could be hanging in there right now. Now we're getting a little bit more of a sell-off to the downside. And let me just update the weekly chart. That hasn't come yet. Oops. Sorry about that. So let me go back. Okay, we're about here right now on the weekly, and here we are on the daily. And so if we keep moving forward, we're coming down to test this low, but we haven't taken it out. Now, you could have bought it here and have your stop here, and you're not stopped out, but you're feeling a lot of pain right now. I mean, we're down about 15 points in a very short period of time. A lot of people see this, and just can't take it anymore, and they say, I'm probably going to get stopped out of this, so they just sell it. And that's part of the discipline. You got to accept the risk. If you do this trade here, you have to accept that your stop is here. Even if this pulls back, you got to live through it. Now we start to lift off, and this is starting to look like a pretty strong support area at 100, but no real follow through. And so we keep watching, and again, we hold 100 again, and now it's starting to lift off, getting back above the 40 a second time. Now we've broken the downtrend line and we've tested the low. Now we come up through the 40 again. So this is a potential second entry. And I think you could look at this one. Here's where I would go, and let's update the weekly. So here's what I would go at this point, and I would say, all right, so we've come down, we had a trigger, but it really needed to come down and test a little bit better. Now we've had a second entry, but it hasn't taken out this peak. And we have low ADX with a MACD hovering below the zero line, not above it or at it, it's below it. And so again, when I see this and I see the violence of the decline, and I recognize there is good support at 100, but maybe this is not quite ready, because I want to point out one other thing. Look at what the green DI line has done. So we dropped down here, made a lower low, a lower high, and then a lower low, and then it's come down under 25. And now these lines are just kind of together down in here. So green has really pulled back and gone through a pretty good correction on the higher time frame during this period. So we kind of want to see green get going again on the weekly. I wouldn't necessarily wait for that to happen to put myself in this trade, but I would want to see green DI get going again, or maybe even get a breakout on the daily chart. I might want to see this area taken out, and even maybe because of that peak there, maybe even 120 taken out to the upside with some improving green DI. And so I wanted to point this out, and I wanted to make sure that I covered this in detail. If we bring this up to speed, it hasn't actually made any kind of a trigger yet. I would still consider 120 to be kind of the key level. We have a low ADX condition, and we don't really have green holding above. It's kind of like green and red and green and red. So this is where we're situated right now. And, I hope you understand, by going through and looking at what's taken place using MACD and using ADX, that you could be sitting on the sidelines here and not be in this yet. Still consider it a potential candidate, because it still meets the criteria we're looking for. Strong ADX on the upper time frame and low ADX on the lower time frame. Now we're waiting for a real sign that the buyers want to come back into this. I think this is a good way to do the analysis and make sure you're not just jumping in any stock that pulls back that has good ADX. So hit that like button for me. Post any questions you might have, and we'll talk to you next time.